Good afternoon, everybody. It's Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Hope you all are doing well on this Friday, and we're going to have a great Canvas presentation for you all today. We have a team here of three fantastic people from Rowan University. We have Chiara Latimer, Dr. Amy Accardo, and Dr. Casey Woodfield. We're going to do a little bit more introductions and offer more context on their work today on affirming the diversity culture on campus. But for now, just a few housekeeping items, as I mentioned, to please indicate that you are in attendance by listing your name and, if applicable, affiliation in the meeting agenda, which you'll find right here in the chat. For many of you, you have been part of our Canvas meetings in the past. I'm Brett Nackman, your host, and this is our monthly chance to connect with researchers, practitioners, self-advocates, educators, community members from all over the world, as we have a common interest in autism and post-secondary education. And for those of you who haven't attended before, we have a few general updates that we offer. We remind everybody to be signed up on our Canvas listserv. That's going to be your way of finding out about our future meetings. Often we see a lot of different events being posted online through folks in our networks, news articles, resources, and other tools. So be sure to be signed up on for that. And if you are so inclined to sign up for an official College Autism Network membership, for which we have a variety of different benefits and membership levels according to who you are and where you're at, we would welcome you to take advantage of some of the benefits associated with a CAN membership. But as we often do with our Canvas meetings, we start off with kind of an icebreaker activity where I'll share a prompt with you all, and you are welcome to chime in the chat or verbally if you'd like. For many of you, you probably recall a few weeks ago, we experienced a time change where we had to switch back our clocks and lose an hour, which is never fun. So the prompt for this month is, what would you do with an extra hour in your day? So that is your prompt, and we're going to see what folks have to share on that front. So we already have multiple people. I think sleeping is going to be our winner for today. Ryan mentions getting outside, going for a walk. Adero, spend more time with friends. Shao asks the good question of with or without kid. A lot of people sleeping. Beth is saying reading. Anita taking a walk. Clarissa is mentioning reading as well. Amy wants to spend more time with the dogs. All right, so a wide variety of activities, both for the mind, for the body, and for the soul. Yeah. So if we all could just squeeze in a little bit more time, that would be ideal. So thanks for indulging in that. Feel free to contribute if other ideas come to mind. We also want to create space for any of you in the community to share any resources that you have come across that might be helpful for the wider group. So if there are any studies you've come across, articles you've read, resources you've discovered, or even announcements that you might have that might be helpful for others to share, this is a good time to do it. You're welcome to put in the chat, in the meeting minutes, or if you'd like to verbally share. Are there any announcements people would like to provide?
I have a quick one. I'm going to ask Casey to help share. Casey, will you share the PhD student opportunity?
Yes, I will. Great. We are recruiting actively right now in our PhD program for a fully funded PhD in education with a special education concentration through Project Immerse, which I will put the link in the chat to our program website, and the flyer is also on our Padlet page. But this is an OSEP funded PhD program with full tuition and a stipend for folks who are interested in doing work around inclusive education, We have a disability studies focus and a neurodiversity focus in our program. And we are really excited about this opportunity. So we are continuing to recruit and accept applications. And I'm happy to talk more about that if you have specific questions, but it's really focusing on multilingual and inclusive, culturally responsive education. And we are hoping for a diverse group of students to be our cohort for this project. It's a collaboration between Rowan, Syracuse University, and the University of New Mexico. And so we will have about 14 students in the cohort who will, across the 3 universities, who will get to collaborate and move through their programs as a group of scholars together. So really exciting, and feel free to be in touch if you have questions. Thank you for the reminder, Amy.
Great to know. Thanks for sharing all. That sounds really exciting. It seems like there were a few other announcements that surfaced in the chat. Mark mentioned going to DC for the Autism Speaks Advocacy Forum and Policy Day. Great. TC throws in the chat, is anybody going to INSAR in Melbourne, Australia in May? I think a lot of us would like to be there. Sounds very appealing. But if there are, definitely respond to TC there in the chat, and maybe there's an opportunity for connection. Shivapriya mentions their master's student, Charlene, just defended her thesis on autistic students' experiences with group work in college. And it's especially focused on communication in group work. And they're looking forward to sharing the presentation with the CAN community. Great. Yeah, definitely follow up on that. That's wonderful. Matthew's mentioning that Neurodivergent at CU is hosting its second Neurodiversity Awareness Day in late April. There's hybrid and fully online options, and it's completely free. So there's a link there for that. Thank you. I'll catalog all of this for the meeting minutes as well. Any other news people would like to share? These are all great.
Brett, I'm happy to mention what we've got going on with CAN. Next week, we're doing a virtual mini conference. It's actually 2 successive Thursday afternoons, March 28th and April 4th. It's called Halfway to the Summit. If you're a CAN member, it's only $50 to attend. If you're not, $125. Really great content that we've kind of curated from last year's summit, but presenting it virtually and with a high focus on interaction and engagement with participants. And then this College Autism Summit, which is our in-person event, happens in October, the 13th to the 16th, and that'll be in Columbus, Ohio. Registration is now open. The call for programs will be opening around April 1st. But if you want to put that on your calendar and bookmark our page, we would love to see you all in person in Columbus. Thanks,
Great.
Brett.
Thank you, Lee. Anything else come to mind for folks that they want to share with the community? Seems like there's a lot of events happening virtually and in person. All righty. Well, if there are any other pieces of news or information you'd like to pass along, put it in the chat. And with that, we'll turn it over to our presenters for today, who have been connected to the CAN community and have presented at the summit that Lee just referenced. We have Chiara Latimer, co-director of the Center for Neurodiversity, PATH Program Coordinator at Rowan University. Also, Dr. Amy Accardo, the co-chair and associate professor of the WISE department at Rowan University, and Dr. Casey Woodfield, assistant professor of the WISE department and a faculty fellow for the Center for Neurodiversity at Rowan University. I think everybody has a lot of titles and a lot of important roles, and it's so glad that you all can be here today as you all talk about affirming neurodiversity culture on campus, something that is very applicable to all of us in terms of what we want to incorporate into our daily line of work. So we'll turn it over to the three of you all, and we'll encourage if anybody has any questions, comments, or further ideas to contribute those to the chat, and we'll allocate the latter part of our time today to engage with that. So I'll turn it over to Chiara, Amy, and Casey.
Thank you, Brett. And thank you all. I'm going to start sharing my screen for our presentation today. And just to make sure. And so as Casey had mentioned earlier, we do actually have a Padlet with some of the resources and information from our presentation that we wanted to share today. So we are going to make sure that that is posted in the chat for you all so that you can access it. We also want to make sure that if there are any follow-up questions, that you know that we will try our best to answer them, and also to be in communication with anyone who would like to touch base with us at our presentation today. So first, we want to take the opportunity to give you a little bit of background on neurodiversity at Rowan and the framework that we operate from, as well as some information about two of our research projects that have taken place. One is related to our scorecard, which we'll discuss in detail a little bit about what that is, and our professional development certificates that also exist. And then lastly, we'll have some discussion about what we learned, implications and next steps, as well as some application for the research and our findings. So first, we would like to invite you to utilize the chat to discuss how you currently contribute to fostering a neurodiversity-affirming campus community. And so please know that we do understand that we're all at different places in the work that we're doing at our universities, but if there's something that you feel like you're doing currently to intentionally help with fostering a neurodiversity-affirming campus community, please feel free to put that into the chat. And we'll give just about a minute and a half or so for individuals to do that so we can highlight some of the comments as they come in before we move through the presentation. One of the comments listed does say, I encourage my clients to self-advocate. Thank you so much for sharing. Promoting disability cultural centers, our mentors, and students are gearing up for Autism Advocacy Project on campus. That's wonderful. Creating a peer-led neurodivergent student group for neurodivergent students on campus to find community and social connections. Educating staff, admin, and instructors. Thank you for that, TC. Building a coalition of neurodivergent campus members. Thank you, Gina. Bringing Chiara to our campus to speak to the Division of Student Affairs with some of my colleagues. I'm excited. Our program is brand new, so we are still developing community one person at a time. And I love that. And as Adero shared that, many of us are also still doing the same. All right, thank you so much for those who have shared and teaching more about neuro-affirming, right, campus communities to undergraduate students, right, not just expecting this of faculty and staff, but also making sure our students are being educated. So thank you all for sharing some of that. Please feel free to continue to add it into the chat as I start to talk a little bit about our background. So we kind of put together a brief timeline. I'm not going to cover every aspect of this timeline, but Rowan has had a history since about 2011 in particular of intentionally building programming that was geared towards supporting autistic middle school and high school students initially, and then expanding that to also look at how we could best support the students on our campus who are attending as undergraduate students. And that led to the development of an Autism Spectrum Advisory Council. And then from there, that has now led to several different student groups, as well as a division of DEI. on our campus the development of our Autism Path program, which is really focused on supporting neurodivergent students in their transition through college and into meaningful employment, as well as a neurodiversity task force being created. And so there have been a lot of different initiatives that started to take place almost all at one time in about 2019. And what we've seen is that as a result of those creation and the stakeholders participating, we've been able to have the development of the certificate programs that we're going to talk about today, as well as the intensive research that's now coming out of our not only Center for Neurodiversity, but in partnership with our Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and our College of Education, as well as other academic colleges across our campus. And so just to provide context, our Center for Neurodiversity is a cultural center that does exist within our Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. That does situate, right, neurodiversity within DEI initiatives. The photo that shows a brick building with white columns and yellow signage is where our center is located, which is a building called Laurel Hall on our campus. It's also the building that I'm sitting in right now. And so it is a place that our students are able to enjoy a sensory suite and also participate in their neurodiversity-based clubs and organizations meet here. They also participate in counseling, coaching, and other initiatives in this space. And so when the center, the neurodiversity, task force was launched, we really wanted to make sure that we were aligning ourselves, right, with not only the neurodiversity movement, but being very clear about the neurodiversity paradigm and explaining that along with other contents related to disability cultural studies. And so these are some of our key tenets. And for the center, our mission is to provide programming, research, and community engagement that value and prioritize neurodiversity culture. And then one of our foundational core values that I really want to highlight is that neurodiversity and disability can coexist, right? And personal experiences are fluid, and that we also recognize that neurodiversity initiatives are best informed by neurodivergent people, which will lead you to why this research that we're talking about today is so important.
So I'm going to pick up here and start us when we were in our spring 2021 semester. This is the semester where we were opening the doors of our Center for Neurodiversity. And at that same time, one of our primary priorities as a task force was self-assessment of what we were doing and self-assessment of our university community, really wanting to make sure that we were opening the center in a way that matched our needs. And so we sort of coined this idea of scorecard internally for scoring ourselves. Our purpose really wasn't so much research at that point as much as to make sure that what we're building in terms of neurodiversity affirming practices, does meet the needs of our campus community. So with that said, our research project, which is this scorecard study, was 2 phases. We decided to start with a survey that it was really important to survey our community. And then we had follow-up focus groups and interviews the following academic year. So really spring 22, summer 22. So what we're going to share is based on our neurodivergent participants. We've taken out the neurotypical participant responses here, and we're just going to sort of give you a general overview of some of our findings. So knowing that we are valuing neurodiversity and looking through the lens of the neurodiversity paradigm, we did come up with 3 very general research questions, again, as a scorecard. And it really, what are the perspectives of neurodivergent university students, faculty, and staff around neurodiversity? We wanted to know, did they value and support neurodivergent students, faculty, and staff, and how did they feel that we were doing a good job? And then, what suggestions did they have for improvement around valuing and supporting neurodiversity on our Rowan campus? And we also have several affiliated campuses. We have a medical school and several sending colleges. Thanks, Chiara. So in terms of our procedures for the survey, we developed a survey with 3 parts, and we did this as a task force. We pretty much met bi-weekly for over a year. And those 3 parts included demographic section, a section of Likert scale questions, and we generated those both from practice as well as from our knowledge of research and the relevant literature. And then we had a section with open-ended questions that sort of mirrored our research questions. They asked things like, what does neurodiversity mean to you? As well as questions like, in what ways do you feel our university supports neurodivergent people? As well as how can we improve? And then in terms of our interviews and focus groups, we made sure that we provided our participants with a choice of modalities to participate, so they could either come in person to meet with us and or through Zoom, video on, video off. We also had a choice of meeting one-on-one in interviews or meeting as a group in focus groups. And once we conducted the survey and the interviews in the focus groups, we found several major themes, and disclosure and identity, as well as mental health, really emerged through a lot of the responses that we gathered, in addition to what we expected, right? Because we specifically asked about, affirming supports and ideas. And then, in terms of disclosure and identity and mental health, what we did was, we used some of that data to help us refine, additional questions. What we really learned was that there were both external and internal barriers that were being shared to really explain why many of our students and our faculty and staff felt that they needed to mask their neurodivergence on campus, and that a lot of them were still experiencing stigma. So within that, some of our notable findings, we were happy to see that our neurodivergent participants define neurodiversity from a strength perspective, although, we expected that. In terms of faculty and staff, we asked, although you identify as neurodivergent, are you comfortable disclosing on campus? And only 38% of faculty and staff reported that they are comfortable. So that was a problem. Although 68% of students who did complete the survey said that they had that comfort level. We also asked our faculty and staff if they're satisfied with the supports they received on campus, and only 35% were satisfied. Another question that we asked was, in addition to identifying as neurodivergent, do you also identify as disabled? And to that question, only 46% of our students identified as disabled in addition to neurodivergent. And actually only 24% of our faculty, I don't think that's on this slide, so even less faculty members. And then we asked, if you do also identify as disabled, what disability labels are you connected to? And primarily we had the response of a mental health condition. Second to mental health condition was ADHD, and then third was autistic. And we feel this is notable and really notable to us in terms of our systems, right? Because we all know in this group that neurodivergent people do not identify as disabled at all times, or maybe only in certain settings or environments, but it really matters within our higher education system if we're only providing supports for students, particularly when they have, that formal diagnosis and request for accommodation. So part of our work has been to think about how can we reach that other, 54% that we're seeing here is not going to get support through our Accessibility Services Center. So on this slide, we just highlight 3 of our specific Likert questions. That first one, are you comfortable identifying as neurodivergent on campus? You can see that while 67.5% of students were comfortable, only 38% of faculty and staff. We also asked if our participants felt that students are recognized and respected as a cultural group on campus. Only 45% of students agreed with that. That wasn't surprising. And in some ways, that did sort of affirm for us that we were on track with our Center for Neurodiversity aim to value and prioritize neurodiversity culture. And then the last one we wanted to spotlight here is that we did find from roughly 60% of both groups that they are experiencing inequities toward neurodivergent people on campus. So following that up, we just wanted to share the voices of some of our neurodivergent campus community members through some quotes. Both quotes on this slide are from students around that theme of disclosure and identity. Our first shared that I don't consider myself disabled. Some people might, but I do like the term neurodivergent. It feels less harsh. It feels less aggressive. Another student shared that there's negative connotations about disability and being stigmatized, but for this student, they do identify as both neurodivergent and disabled. And on the next slide, this one's around mental health. We found that mental health responses were often related to that desire or request to be able to build a relationship with someone that was maintained over time. So the first student shared that they think the primary place where existing mental health supports have fallen short is with individual therapy. I'm bothered by the fact that it's so temporary because it's very stressful to have to re-explain your whole story to someone. And for me, my individual therapist moved to a private practice and I couldn't see her anymore. And the second quote here is from a staff member, and they noted that if they're really struggling with stuff ADHD-wise or mental health-wise, just knowing that their team understands that they may have fluctuations to their workflow and are not intentionally dropping the ball or anything is important to them. So again, really that relationship building and understanding. So our second research question was about existing supports and what stood out as what we're doing well, right? What are we doing that's neurodiversity affirming? So students shared that they are happy overall with the resources that we have available. They felt we had a vast array of resources. They also did share that they are happy that we have psychologists available to students, and they acknowledge that not many campuses have that. In terms of faculty, they're very much like our neurodiversity affinity group. So that is just for neurodivergent faculty and staff, and that group has led to some positive results. This quote on the right side of the slide, the participant notes how, as a result of that group, they've had conversations with their team that have benefited them. And then we also had positive feedback regarding our neurodiversity specific student clubs and also regarding the culture of our Office of Accessibility Services in general, and stating that that does feel neurodiversity affirming. So in terms of our third research questions, it was, what are some recommendations for ideas and action steps? So you can take a look here. We have some words bolded that didn't come up in the prior content shared. The idea of universal design for learning and differentiating instruction came up from faculty and staff many times. We also had the idea of representation and equity and inclusion efforts, and really making sure that neurodivergence is incorporated in DEI efforts as emerging is super important. And also just the overall idea of neurodiversity specific supports, not using existing support to be our system for neurodivergent campus community members. So that takes us to some of our actionable recommendations. And there is a paper coming out on this content. That post-print QR code takes you to that paper there on the left. So our first recommendation as a result of our participant voices is that it is important for universities to center neurodiversity in their DEI initiatives and make sure neurodiversity is not left out. Our second action there is to expand neurodiversity specific support. So for example, we're working to have a sensory friendly space in every building on our campus. That's a goal. Third, to tailor mental health and wellness supports to shift as possible to those holistic and individualized supports when we can. One thing we do is we have a set day of the week where we have a counselor at our Center for Neurodiversity. And then fourth, professional development, and that need for professional development around neurodiversity and also around related topics, for example, universal design for learning. And that idea of increasing professional development that we got from our participants through our survey and our follow-up interviews and focus groups connects into our next session that Casey's going to start to share, because it ties right into some of our certificate program work.
Thanks, Amy. So what I will be talking about are our certificate programs. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of each of them and then dive into more detail about the participants' experiences from some research that we have been doing with folks who completed the certificates. So in terms of structure, we have the Inclusive Pedagogy and Practices Certificate and the Creating a Neuro-Inclusive Workplace Certificate. Both are 5-module certificate programs that are delivered virtually. They're comprised of 5 modules that have asynchronous activities that we use Canvas, discussions, a variety of content with lots of choice and flexibility built in. And then we have 5 synchronous sessions that happen over the course of about 6 weeks for each certificate program. Both of the certificate programs grow out of content that is directly connected to the work that both Chiara and Amy have spoken about so far. And they were developed by a neurodiverse group of faculty, staff, and collaborators across the university. Both are structured around a culminating project. So folks in the cohorts that participate in the certificates have to, in order to complete the work, have to identify a barrier and an inclusive solution. So I'll talk more about what that looks like in practice, but that's really the goal. So in addition to professional development, we combine PD through these certificates with action-oriented work for folks to actually do something in their sphere of influence, either on campus or externally. We have been able to offer CEUs and a certificate of completion, depending on which certificate program folks are in, depends on the CEU that they get. And the biggest difference between the two of them is really the audience. And so while we have had external participants, particularly early on in the, I'm going to use the shorthand IPP, the Inclusive Pedagogies and Practices Certificate. It's primarily geared towards folks in higher education, and specifically these days more geared towards Rowan's campus, although we have had people from other universities participate. And the Creating a Neuro-Inclusive Workplace Certificate is primarily geared towards folks outside of the university in business and organizations, especially human resources. And so again, while we have had internal people take it, the focus is just a bit different. And so it's really about the workplace environment and diving deeply into that. If you could switch to the next slide, Chiara, I can go back one. Both of them do grow out of the same content. As I mentioned, the Inclusive Pedagogies and Practices does have 2 tracks. And so while cohorts of about 8 to 10 participants each do work through the certificate together, they are encouraged to identify as either pedagogy or practice. Some choose to do both if they're really interested, but it's typically based on the role that they play in higher education that they want to further develop their professional development around. But all of the work in both certificates across all tracks start with the same content. And so it's a focus on disability rights and the history of disability and neurodiversity, the movements, the paradigms, the frameworks. They both focus explicitly on including disability in a culture of DEI. So that really connects to what Amy was sharing about the feedback we received from the scorecard. And then the inclusive pedagogies and practices tends to have a heavier emphasis on technology and how to leverage technology either in the classroom or to create more neuro-inclusive practices in a campus setting. And then sort of halfway through the certificate programs, the tracks diverge, and those in the pedagogy focused track will dive very deeply into universal design for learning for the classroom. And those who are in the practice track really focus on neurodiversity in the workplace and on creating inclusive spaces on campus. And then on the right-hand side here, the creating a neuro-inclusive workplace certificate dives even deeper and is more tailored to folks in the business world. So how to create inclusive hiring practices. This is particularly relevant for our HR participants, and how to support and retain neurodivergent employees. So there really is something for everyone. When we have been conducting a broader qualitative research study on the experiences of a subset of participants in these early iterations of both certificate programs. And so we're really looking at, what's working, what's not working, and how can we even more expansively and deeply at the same time contribute to a neurodiversity affirming culture, both on campus and beyond. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the key findings today, just to note, because we do want to protect confidentiality. We're not talking too much about participant identities, but we have been doing interviews. We did conduct interviews with 13 participants, 9 from the inclusive pedagogy and practices, and 3 from the neuro-inclusive workplace certificate. And they spanned roles. So we had faculty, librarians, advisors, human resources administrators, and entrepreneurs that participated in the study. And about a third of them did identify as neurodivergent themselves. And as Amy mentioned, we really look at these research opportunities coming out of our DEI and neurodiversity, Center for Neurodiversity work as an opportunity to reframe what methods look like. And so we did have a very intentional approach to our qualitative methods to center neurodiversity and to model the kind of inclusive research, data collection, and analysis that we hope participants hope for, right? Based on the kind of work that they learned in the certificate programs. So lots of choice, lots of communication, different communication modalities. And so I'm happy to talk more about the details of that in the Q&A if that's helpful. But for right now, I will move forward into the findings because I could spend all day talking about methods, as Amy and Chiara both know. So some of the big things that we wanted to share with this audience is what worked. So folks were very supportive of giving feedback around the cohort model. They felt like they developed a lot of trust with the people that they did each certificate program with. They also felt and shared quite a bit about feeling that it really worked well, that as they were learning about neurodiversity affirming practices and universal design for learning pedagogical strategies, that we were also modeling those as well in the certificate program. Again, the emphasis on lived experiences and neurodivergent and disabled people leading the conversations came through in our findings from this study as well. And perhaps the biggest takeaway has been the participants' focus on what worked about the action-oriented approach. So one participant, for example, shared, "I remember being really interested in the final projects because that was really like being able to take that knowledge and transform it into something that could be acted on. I found that really impactful. And so in addition to what worked, we also wanted to know what didn't, or what barriers participants experienced. We learned about 3 different kinds of barriers. There were barriers to even getting into the certificate program. There were barriers that involved the experience, right? How participants struggled to find time or connect depending on the group. But the biggest barrier that we wanted to highlight today was around the implementation. So folks told us about feeling very overwhelmed once they got done with the certificates, specifically around UDL. Many told us that they wanted to change everything, but couldn't figure out where to start. And so that's a common concern that comes up a lot with universal design for learning in particular. And folks highlighted the lack of resources to support their work moving out of the certificate program. So they said, participants shared, nobody can dedicate their full time to this work because everyone is just throwing in the bits and pieces they have left of their energy and time to this stuff. And I am sensitive that we are running a little short on time, so I'm going to move us forward to the impact of the projects. So the action projects that folks really gave feedback on as being the most impactful aspect of the project, of the certificate programs in both programs, they really follow this progression of identifying a need, making a plan, enacting a plan, and then sharing that evidence to a larger community. And so that's where the 5 synchronous sessions really focus in the certificate programs. And so what we've done as part of this research, on the next slide, we've tried to map the overall like types of impact that have come out of this work. And so the really cool thing, and I will end on this, Chiara, so we can save on time, is that folks are taking their projects that they start in these certificate programs and running with them or rolling with them in whatever way. And so we're not sharing specific examples because, to be honest, people are publishing on this. They are presenting it. They are making it their work. And I think in terms of fostering a neurodiversity-affirming culture and community, that's the really big takeaway for us, is that once that space and time has been allocated, people are diving in and going very deeply into this work. And so we have 4 main buckets of the kinds of impact that these projects have taken the form of. If you go back, Chiara, just for a second, I'll just highlight, like, people are focusing on how to change their inclusive leadership approaches. Then we have subsets of participants who have been creating resources for students, faculty, staff, and community. We have people who have developed and implemented trainings across constituents. And then, as I mentioned, people are disseminating this work, doing research, presenting on campus and at conferences, and really making this an area of their professional focus. So that's been very cool to see beyond the certificate programs.
And then just to help us, I want to be sensitive of the time. One of the things that are the most important at this point was also thinking continuously about what are our areas of growth, right, and improvement. And so some of the feedback that we did receive were related to really content tailoring. And so every time it felt almost as when we did the interviews that we were finding that most individuals were saying, this is great. Can we tailor this content though to our medical schools? Can we tailor this content to a specific department on campus? And I believe this will answer also one of the questions that I saw in the chat early on. Also tailoring the content, right, to address more intersectional identities that exist. And so our goal is to continue to use this to catapult, right, the certificate to continue to grow and to meet the needs of current and previous and future participants. And then thinking about like the logistical updates that we might need to think about in terms of scaling, providing even more clarity on our expectations. And some of these logistical updates we started implementing almost immediately once we received this feedback, which is also wonderful that we're able to do so and that we're in roles where we can make those changes as feedback's being provided. And then really helping individuals to move right beyond compliance and encouraging faculty to go right the extra mile, right, to not just check a box in terms of like accommodation, but also for them to want to think about how they can be more inclusive and neuro-affirming in their classroom settings and for our professionals within their practices. And then for some individuals, they really wanted to really refine and expand their projects. So they're continuing to look for ways to continue to make those investments in publication and making those improvements. And this is something that's really important. And so we know and knew that this information that we had would be a lot to share. But one of the we invite for all of you to still connect with us if you would like. And as Brett shared earlier, we can be reached at our emails that are located at the bottom of this slide. We can also make sure they are placed in the chat. You can also feel free to know that the information that Casey did share about Project Immerse. And on March 27th, we're welcoming Marcia Brissett Bailey, who is the author of Black, Brilliant, and Dyslexic, as our virtual speaker for our Center for Neurodiversity. And so it is open to all and it is free. So we would like to take a moment, though, to stop sharing and answer some of the questions in the chat. And if it's okay, I would like to answer in particular, I believe we have a question that was related to individuals who may be in states where DEI initiatives, right, are in many ways, right, under attack. And so I did want to just share a little bit of information. Our university is in a planning phase of thinking about how important it is and how the changes in political standings can impact DEI-related initiatives and funding that's available for that. And so we do recognize that the center does exist within our division of DEI, but something that I did not share is that it also is connected because of our current co-director roles to our division of student affairs. And so that close contact between the two, I think, also provides us with the opportunity to speak to our center continuing to exist and operate as is in connection to student affairs and some of the services that it provides underneath of that aspect of our university structure. In addition, I know that there were a couple of questions in the chat about specifically student feedback, and I know that Amy has spent some time responding to some of those questions as well. And so if there's a question that it seemed that we did not answer or that we missed, please let us know. And if you would like to be in communication, we are more than happy to continue to answer questions.
Hey,
Yes.
Chiara.
Sorry.
It's Lee. Just can I get a quick clarification? When you say that you are kind of co-connected to student affairs, is that through disability services or accessibility services, or is that department sort of separate from the neurodiversity efforts?
So under our student affairs, our Office of Accessibility Services does fall under that, as well as like our academic-based support programs. And the PATH program that I'm the program coordinator of also falls underneath of that in connection to accessibility services and the Office of Career Advancement. And so because our DEI office is not an office, it's a division in and of itself. That is why there's this connection that exists between the two. And that's primarily connected to the structure of those who work within our Center for Neurodiversity, having a dual report, basically.
Thank you.
I was going to add to that discussion too. when we launched the Center for Neurodiversity, I was the director at that time, and I really felt like it was such a strength that our center was, is housed within our division of DEI, and um, spending a lot of time, getting our campus community familiar with the center and what it was all about. When we would share, one of our primary focuses is to center neurodiversity in our DEI initiatives. That was where we got so much buy-in from faculty and staff. They would nod in agreement. They understood that, and they felt it was a clear need. It was then when I would say something like, and to value and prioritize neurodiversity culture, that I would get a look of confusion from people because they really didn't understand what either disability culture or neurodiversity culture meant, right? So we sort of learned there that that's where we needed to do some of our work, that people, it was DEI related intersectional, work, that they don't realize that there is, you know, that aspect of who someone is that's connected to culture when you think about disability. And that to us, like some of that core work related to, stigma and biasy and all became really important. And in addition to the certification shared, we also have a DEI certificate program. It shouldn't be all about certificates, but we have that as well. So we also as a team went back to the DEI certificate program and helped improve it by adding neurodiversity throughout it where we saw like that gap was missing. And when we opened our center, we worked with, I'm not going to be able to remember them, but 5 other universities who already had centers met with us. And really ours was, what we were proud to say, one of the first with a focus that had a DEI emphasis. So yeah, I mean, I love the question because of course we have the concern, and I think we're lucky in that our structure is both connected to DEI, but also it's more like the faculty and staffing and administration is connected to student affairs. And I think that will keep us safe, but it's frustrating that we even have to have that conversation. That's my thinking.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, we happen to be really lucky that we have a group of folks in the College of Education, where Amy and I both are located, that do very neurodiversity affirming and inclusive education focused work. And so that connection between the College of Ed specifically and the Center for Neurodiversity might have been initially sort of just shared interest, but now has become even more formalized in terms of a lot of overlap between the work that we're doing in that college, the faculty center for teaching, and the Center for Neurodiversity. So we're trying to do a lot more of making those connections explicit across all of the work so that people are aware that it is part of our DEI work and also these other aspects as well on campus.
I think we might have time for one very, very quick question if anybody has one. I think you all did a wonderful job of addressing them in the chat too. I think we might then just wrap up a couple minutes before the hour mark. So much great stuff packed in, and thank you for also just illustrating the actionable aspects of the work that you all are engaging in, and clearly certificate programs are furthering that in many ways. So Chiara, Casey, Amy, thank you all again for presenting today. We'll look forward to continuing to engage with your scholarship and all the wonderful practices that you're espousing and that your participants are sharing as well. We will see you all very shortly in just over a month, Friday, April 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have the presentation from Dr. Mark Tapia, who I see is on the call today. And Mark's going to be talking about self-advocacy at the university level. So that's going to be obviously a very relevant conversation for so many of us. In the meantime, we'll see you on the Canvas listserv. We'll be sharing a video link to of today's presentation in the next week. And we look forward to communicating with you all very soon. Hope you all have a good rest of your day and a good weekend ahead. Thanks.